Would you doom an entire world of people to die if it meant that you would live? Victory at last. The big bad has finally been vanquished, the day has been saved, all of the damsels in distress and innocent bystanders have been rescued, and the heroes are ready to reap the reward, kiss their love interest, and walk toward the setting sun. Victory? Really? Then why does no one feel like cheering? Why is the atmosphere so heavy and melancholy? Why do you find yourself counting your losses as well as your gains? Oneshot has to be one of, if not my absolute favorite video game ever made. Oneshot follows the story of a young child named Niko and their journey through this world that is not their own. Niko is taken from their home and is dropped into a world without light. This world does not have a sun. This world used to have a sun, but it disappeared a long time ago. Niko is then told that they must return the light with this light bulb that they find in a basement. But how could anyone ask Niko to do this? If Niko agreed to this, would it even work? Could this light bulb really bring the sun back? Would anyone agree to this if they were put into the scenario? Oneshot is a JRPG style game with no combat, just a fair amount of puzzle solving. This is why the story is front and center, and it's also the strongest part about this game. Oneshot originally came out back in 2014 as it was made for a submission for an indie game maker contest. The console port of Oneshot is set to come out this year, so I decided to make a video detailing how Oneshot's story has crafted the perfect bittersweet ending. But first, what is a bittersweet ending? The concept of a bittersweet ending is nothing new to storytelling. It's essentially an altered version of the typical comedy story. Comedy is one of the 7 basic stories. The 7 basic stories is essentially a classification of different stories based on their events. The customary structure of a comedy consists of a lighthearted and humorous story with a cheery conclusion, most likely with a kind and ambitious protagonist. Niko certainly fits the bill for the protagonist side of things, but upon taking your first steps outside, we see that this story is anything but cheerful. The beginning of our story leads us to the Barrens, a desolate wasteland filled with nothing but sand, ash, and the remains of an industrial facility. The sky is empty, gaseous geysers are gushing out of the ground, and the only signs of life seem to be these shrimp that reside inside these glowing blue pools. On top of that, the first character we meet, Silver, a robot designed to act like a human, upon seeing the sun for the first time, simply tells Niko that they should just leave, and it would be better for the world to just die naturally. Silver has made the Barrens her home for an indeterminate amount of time now, and even when she sees this potential hope that the sun could come back, she rejects it. Yeah, that's pretty much the opposite of cheerful. Another one of the story types would be that of voyage and return, in which the main character enters a strange new world, complete with its own set of unique challenges, and then returns home. Oneshot's story fits into this category as well, but not entirely. Along Niko's journey, periodically they find this computer, which is a tool for this being known as the Entity.
I'm a computer.
The Entity uses this computer to communicate. The Entity acts as the antagonist for the player as well as Niko, taking a lot of aspects from the overcoming the monster story type. This is why Oneshot's story is so unique. You can gather many elements from the 7 basic stories. Like I said, the comedy ending always ends happy in some way. The protagonist always gets what they want. However, in the original 2 endings of Oneshot, not everyone gets what they want. This is what makes the story of Oneshot feel so much more real, because in the real world, everything doesn't always work out. In these 2 endings, someone has to suffer no matter what you choose. The protagonist is the person in the story that pushes the story forward. Our main protagonist is typically the person who decides where the story goes based on their actions. In Oneshot, the protagonist is the one that decides Niko's fate. What? You thought Niko was the protagonist? No. Unfortunately, this is where things get more complicated. That's right, you are the protagonist. You are the driving force of the story, not just through controlling Niko, but it is in your hands at the end of the game to decide the fate of this world and those who live within it, as well as Niko's. And like I said, everyone can't get what they want. Niko is made aware of your presence and addresses you by name. Well, the name of your PC, but you can change it later to your actual name if you want. Periodically, you, the player, and Niko share conversations with each other, but the purpose of these talks is to give the player insight on Niko's life. Niko is from a world that has a sun, just like ours. The ploy of making the player an actor in the story is immersive enough, but the swapping of knowledge between you and Niko really sells that Niko is their own person. Niko has a home to go back to. Like most games, you control Niko seemingly without their knowledge, and you are meant to guide them on their journey. The game makes it very clear that Niko is your responsibility. If at any point you close the game when Niko is awake, the world around them seemingly disappears, and Niko is left within a dark, empty place. In the original release, if you were to close the game at any place that wasn't a bed, you would actually kill Niko instantly. Like any good story, the game gives you a reason to care about Niko. You identify with them, and more importantly, you naturally want to care for them because they're a kid. There is something to be said about how important it is to make a character likable. It's not a requirement for a good story to have a popular main character, but it definitely is cause for investment to see the story to the end. That investment will carry you through the story as well as make you feel the weight of your choice. It really is beneficial for a story to have a main character that is likable but also identifiable. Halfway through the Barrens, your goals become clear. You have to travel to the Glen and then move on to Refuge. This is the last standing city in this world. Within Refuge, there is a place called the Tower that is said to be as old as time itself. The tower is so massive it's the first thing you see over the horizon in the Barrens. The Barrens are hostile and empty, so Niko at this point has no choice but to proceed to the Glen. They'll be safer there. Niko can fall asleep in certain points at these marked beds. When you take Niko to one of these beds, they fall asleep and the game closes. Upon restarting the game, you are treated to one of Niko's many dreams. These dreams play out before you, and you are allowed to see Niko's home for a brief moment. The game makes it very clear that Niko's one desire is to go home to their mother. As the player, if you care about Niko, then you should want the same thing. Upon entering the Glen, you see that this world has other inhabitants. There are still people living in this world, just barely hanging on to their lives. The Glen is a much nicer place compared to the Barrens. The Glen is filled with fireflies and trees that have evolved to survive without natural sunlight. The trees have mutated to secrete a special sap that contains something called phosphor. This substance can capture and store light energy. Within the Glen, Niko finds a small village of people just going about their daily lives. This is where the story takes a shift as you spend most of your time in the Glen talking to its inhabitants. Most notably, Alula, Calamus, and of course, Maze. Alula and Calamus are siblings. They live alone in the ruins of the old world, but they still look out for each other. Niko and the player search for Alula as she has been lost within the ruins. While on their search, Niko stumbles across Maze. You see, Maze is a powerful plant spirit who is trapped deep within the cave. Maze is weak. She doesn't have that much time left. She asks for the sun, just to hold it for a while. You, the player, have to make the choice whether to give her the light bulb or not. This choice, ultimately, is inconsequential, because the true purpose of meeting these people is to show the player, as well as Niko, that there are people in this world who have not given up hope. If you choose to leave the light with Maze, you later return to find that she has disappeared, and all that remains of her is this small seed. This seed will only grow after Niko returns the light to the tower. Niko finds the light bulb, but the light is incredibly dim. Not until Niko picks up the bulb does the light return. This is around the time when most people realize that the light and Niko are connected. Questions will continue to race within the player's mind until the end of the game, unfortunately. The purpose of the Glen is to give Niko, and more importantly the player, a reason to care about the people in this world. At the beginning of the game, the entity explains that your actions here will affect Niko, but now it seems that's not the case. Niko's desires are clear, and now the world's desires are clear, but now we are getting hints that those two goals are not both possible. Upon entering Refuge, Niko is greeted by a cyberpunk-like vista. Crimson red buildings and lights sprawl over the last city of this world. This is where you will find the tower, but before we get to the tower, we are treated to even more of this world's inhabitants. We meet the lamplighter going about his day-to-day job, currently in the process of fixing the elevator with his foot. Unofficially named Sebastian, the lamplighter is clearly overworked, and they also seem to be one of the only people who's working on things. Most of the more intelligent citizens of Refuge, like Kip, Silver's creator, have been working on building robots to explore areas of the world beyond the Barrens that are deemed unsafe for travel. And finally, we meet George, the head librarian, who has still been finding the time to publish books even in uncertain times. A lot of the people in Refuge mimic the people that live in our world. Hard workers, problem solvers, and knowledge seekers, still going about their daily lives like days even exist in their world. I guess you could say they do have the advantage of not knowing what they're missing. The mundane lives these people live while things are slowly becoming worse really makes this world feel alive. All these people can do is live. They can't really do anything meaningful to save the world because it's out of their hands. It's in the player and Niko's hands, whether or not this world survives or not. Something happens right before you get to the tower. Niko enters a cafe in the search for food and is offered pancakes by Ling, someone who works there. Pancakes are Niko's favorite food. Niko explains how their mother would always cook their pancakes when they were feeling upset. Niko pauses. They begin to realize just how long they've been away from their mother. Niko remembers what Silver said, and Niko begins to doubt the sun and its ability to save the world. Upon reaching the tower, the entity has laid a trap for you and Niko. You eventually break free and make your way to the tower's elevator. As it turns out, the entity was trying to protect Niko in their own way because they weren't sure what you were going to choose. Because you do have a choice, dear player. The entity tells you that you need to destroy the sun. Doing so will send Niko home, but of course, doom this world to be dark forever. The opposing choice is for Niko to complete their pilgrimage and return the sun to the tower. But if you do this, Niko's fate is unclear. This dilemma is what the entire game has been building towards. Every NPC has given you some modicum of understanding of what they have been through, as well as what the world has been through. This world that Niko's been put into has been in a state of decay for a long time now. The people here, nature itself, has been holding on this whole time without even knowing if Niko is ever going to return the sun. Eventually, without the sun, this world will die. However, Niko has their own life as well. They have a family. They have people who care about them. There's a good chance that at this point you care about Niko as well. Upon reaching the summit of the tower, the entity demands that you explain the choice to Niko. And finally, we reach the one and only choice that matters. If you choose to return the light, the sun will be restored. All of the NPCs you met along the way will walk outside and bear witness to the sun. Some of them for the first time. If you do so, you are left with nothing but the image of the room that Niko woke up in, and Niko is nowhere to be found. Alternatively, if you tell Niko to destroy the light, everything changes. Niko explains that they see the way home, and that they can hear their mother calling them. Niko leaves the game completely, and then they disappear. The world as you saw it simply turns to an empty black void. No one is around. Niko would live, but this world and all the characters within will die. This is what makes the two endings of Oneshot both have a perfect bittersweet ending, because they are two halves of the ideal ending. The correct choice is truly subjective, but both are sad in some way. It all hinges on what you, the player, believes is the right thing. Niko literally asks you, what's the right thing to do? Do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? You have been with Niko this entire time, but you have only seen glimpses of these other people. Would you let your bias towards Niko affect your choice? Is this world even real? Maybe, maybe not. In the grand scheme of things, yes, we all know this is just a video game, but the truly commendable characteristic of this game is that the developers want you to believe that this world and Niko are real as well. The story makes you care about both the world and Niko, and then it makes you choose between them. I think bittersweet endings can be the best kind. Things don't always work out in the real world, nor do things always go down the drain. The key here is balance. Both things achieve something, and they both take something away. Come to think of it, bittersweet is the perfect word to describe Oneshot as a whole. The people in this game know their situation is dire, but they persist. They know their world is dying, but this is their world nonetheless, and they will live within it. How could they do anything else? They can't do anything else. They have nothing else to do but live, and they'll do so together. Yes, I know there is a special true ending that is completed via the solstice run in which everyone gets what they want, but these were the original two endings for Oneshot. The original game only had these two endings, and after that, you couldn't go back and replay, because you only have one shot. A lot like life. Some choices will leave you bitter. Some will leave you sweet, but Oneshot gives you both, despite which path you complete. Sorry.